Sennheiser's been making a pretty legendary headphone for a long time, and now there's a new one in the lineup, the 660S2. But is it any good? If you're familiar with the channel, you know I have the 656XX, and I've had the 660S in the past, the 6XX being the one I use the most often. Along with a million other things on the wall of headphones, the 660S, well, it's different. In some ways it maintains the traits that we love from the rest of the line, and in other ways it completely abandons them. Let's start with build and comfort, and then we'll talk about sound quality. Build-wise, well, this isn't really much of a departure from what we're used to. Other than some bronze accent pieces, this is very familiar, and all of the parts here are interchangeable with others in the line. The driver looks a little bit different, but we see the same clips on the inside there, and pretty much all of these pieces can come right apart. Just like on our 6XX. This is a design and a build we are very familiar with that's been, well, time tested. The weakest point being these headbands, which sometimes do snap, but you have to put them under pretty considerable stress to do so. What's really new here is in the driver. As far as I can tell, everything else is the same old 6XO series that we're used to. I do like some of the new aesthetic changes. The flat edges are pretty cool, and the bronze accents again are nice. But since we're not looking at anything new on the build, and the comfort, well, it hasn't really changed at all. It's very clampy out of the box. If you give it some time, it loosens up, and to me, I find it one of the most comfortable headphones on the planet. But for some people, well, the clamp pressure might be a bit much. Since there's nothing really new in terms of build, let's talk about sound quality. The HD660 series is known for its strong mid-range, its neutrality, its good lower ear gain, and all around an intimate, detailed sound for the price. The 660S2 changes that up some because, well, we actually lose a lot of that intimacy, at least in the vocal region. This headphone still has that same sort of mid-range. The bass isn't really any different from the HD600 or HD650, which is interesting because the marketing point on this is that it has more bass, and technically it does than the 660S version 1, but compared to the 6XX, well, on my measurement rig and on my in-ear mics, the 6XX actually has more bass and sub-bass. But the bass is pretty decent on the 660S2. Where things have really changed is actually the treble. See that range around 3 kilohertz? Well, it's a lot more recessed on the 660S2 than it is on everything else in the lineup. It gives a bit of the illusion of a wider soundstage in this case, and on some music it turns out really good. Some things that are very thick and heavy in that range, like electric guitars, well, they sound a bit more spacious, a bit more separated, and because of the recesses in that range, we hear a little bit more of the upper treble and a bit more of the mid-range instead. This can be very pleasant, though on most music I do end up missing the intimacy and the forwardness of that 3 kilohertz range. The 660S takes it sometimes too far, but for the most part it lends towards this headphone having a darker and warmer sound compared to the rest of the 6XO line rather than just more sub-bass. Which is another interesting thing because the HD650 has always been known for being a warmer and darker sounding headphone. This just takes that warmth and darker sound to another level. In terms of technicality, I really don't feel like these are an improvement over the HD650, 660S, HD600, and so on. The detail really does actually sound about the same, and the only time I felt like I was experiencing more detail was once again on tracks that are very cluttered in the 3 kilohertz region. Having that region recessed a little bit made it easier to hear other things in other parts of the mix, and in those songs I felt like I was retrieving more detail, but I think it's likely due to just a tonal change. This isn't to say that the 660S2 is bad, it's just I already like the treble in the 6XX, 600, and 650, and I really don't feel like this was a necessary change for my personal preferences. Now there are people who found the 600, 6XX, and 650 a little bit shouty and a little bit busy in that range, and for those people, the 660S2 will likely be a really strong contender. And something that I spoke about actually with Andrew Resolve, which by the way, Resolve has a video on this too over on the Headphone Show. It should be live the same time as this one. You should probably go check out his video after this one. I feel like in general it's just good to get multiple perspectives on a headphone if it's one you're interested in buying, so go check out Andrew's review after this. And while you're at it, don't forget I post videos weekly on the Headphone Show as well. Something that we both agreed on was that this is not a headphone for people who want more bass, but instead it's a headphone for people who want less treble. Though there are times where it being dark and warm can be a bit overwhelming. The song Something in the Way, Nirvana track, I'm sure plenty of you have heard, it is just too warm and too dark on these headphones. I feel like the vocal intimacy of the 6XX and 650 do really well with that song, and we kind of lose out on some of that magic. But if you like the old stuff Linkin Park released from Hybrid Theory and Meteora, well, that sounds fantastic on the 660S2. It sounds thick, it sounds rich, and if you throw it on a tube amp, it sounds wide. I don't want to seem like I'm hating on this headphone because I'm not. It's actually a really good headphone still, and in fact, I'd say it's better than most random headphones out there. The thing is, the 6XX and the 650 are already so good, and the 6XX, well, that's less than half the price. Depending on when it's on sale or not, it's a lot cheaper. Now, if that's the sound you're after, this would be worth it. Because here's the thing, the 6XX, 600, and 650 I think are some of the only headphones someone can buy and happily keep as a daily driver or regular use headphone for like 20 years. I've been using the HD660 for over 10 years, and truth be told, I don't think anything will ever truly replace it, and I think it'll always be part of my collection. So if you're asking if this kind of price tag is worth that sound, well, if you like the 6XO range and you just want that little change, sure, of course it is, because it's probably a headphone you're going to keep for like 10, 20 years. Granted, you'll have to replace the pads often, that's just something you have to accept with Sennheisers, and that's not a particularly bad thing, it's just like changing the tires on a car, but this one is going to lean much more into a specific taste. I do see myself using this relatively often, not as often as my 650 or my 6XX, but it will spend time on my head. Just like I spend a lot of time in this DMS hoodie. Look at that, it's got a nice logo on it, side pockets. I've been mentioning this thing in like every video, and I legitimately have been wearing this every single day because it's super comfy. If you want to help support the channel and get a sweet hoodie, you can check these out at dmstech.store. With all of this said, let's talk about objective sound and frequency response. The guys over at headphones.com have a B&K 5128. That is an expensive measurement rig. And so we're gonna use their measurements here. Now, I wanna note that isn't the exact same unit that I have in my hands, but they are both 660S2s. Here's the raw measurement. This is against diffuse field with an 8 decibel slope. That basically aligns to something that's relatively similar to the Harman research. That targets the dotted line, and then the raw take of the 660S2 is our red line here. In just a second, I'm gonna flip this over to a compensated measurement so you guys can have both. You can see here we see very similar bass roll off to the other headphones in the 6XO series. Definitely less treble in the 3 kHz region, a bit of a recess between 4 and 5K, and then from there on up in the treble, up until about 14, 15 kHz, things are pretty adherent to the target. Flipping over to the compensated measurement, we see a pretty big recess there at 3 kHz, and that is reflective of how the 660S2 sounds, especially when compared to other things in the line. Now again, compared to things like the HD660S version 1, this does have more bass, but compared to the HD650 and 6XX, it's not really that different in terms of bass. The difference is again, less treble, specifically in that 3 kHz range. I feel like a broken record at this point, but you get the idea. On an objective level, the HD600 is still the best one in the lineup. On a subjective level for me, it's still the HD650 and 6XX, and for someone out there, it will likely be the 660S2. If this sounds like something that you're after, then sure, you can absolutely justify the price. Though at this price range, there are things that are more technically capable in detail. I don't think they have quite the same staying power. There's things like the Hyphaman Edition XS, which is a pretty detailed, spacious, large planar magnetic headphone that's built okay. And I think that it's one that a lot of people like, but I don't think it's one that's going to be around and be lasting 10 years from now. Whereas this, I think people will still have these in 10 years. That's just the staying power of the HD6XO lineup, which is not to discourage you from buying what you want. If you want that more detailed planar, go out there and get it. Enjoy it, listen to it every day. Have fun and soak up every bit of the music. But also don't let yourself be held back from something that you want because of a technicality like that. You might be missing out on a little bit of detail, but you might really like the timbre, you really might like the tonality. And despite the tonal changes in this, timbre really doesn't seem to suffer. With the exception of a track that sometimes gets a bit warm like that Nirvana track, Well, Sennheiser's timbre is legendary and consistent. So is this a positive or is this a negative review? Well, it sits kind of in the middle, and it's one that says it's up to you. This isn't a bad headphone. It's also not a headphone that I'm going to rush out and say everyone has to buy it right now. It's the right headphone for someone, and hopefully I've helped those people who are looking for something like this find it, and help the people who are considering this. It might not be for you, but now you know. For me, it still has been and will be the HD650. But I'm glad to see Sennheiser is still expanding this line, and I'm curious to see what they do next. I know for a fact that several of the engineers working at Sennheiser, they browse forums, they watch YouTube videos, and they're actually listening to the community now. That's something that I really love to see. So whatever you guys have to say about this, they'll be watching, they'll be listening, and I'm sure they'll put it into the next thing they make. Hey Sennheiser guys, if you're watching, this is what I would love. A little more bass extension on the HD6XX or 650, the same 3 kHz region that we really like on these, and just a little bit more extension in the upper treble. Nothing else changed. If you can do all that, I would be in bliss. Honestly, if they just took a regular HD650 and made it in like an aluminum chassis, I'd probably pay like double or triple the price for it, just because I use that headphone so much. I would wear it forever. It would feel super premium. It'd just be great. I'm just rambling at this point. Let's wrap up this video. Guys, if you liked it, please leave a like down below. Comment, let me know what you want to see in the future and what you think about this change. Is it welcome? Is this something you're looking for, or do you think that they messed up? If you want to get active in the community, that's another great place to discuss it. You can at the forum or Discord, both at the link in the video description. Don't forget to check out Andrew's video over on the headphone show. And that's it. Don't forget to stick around and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Until next one, guys. Peace.